They say you can't buy happiness, but no one warns you about the cost of faking it. I'm Claire, 28, and I accidentally became a sugar baby to one of New York's most dangerous men. Hold tight, because this story is anything but sweet. It all started innocently enough, if you can call sneaking into an exclusive charity gala in a thrifted Chanel dress innocent. I had no invitation, no plus one, and certainly no connections to the world of New York's elite. But something inside me just couldn't resist the allure of it. The glittering chandeliers, the champagne flutes clinking in perfect harmony, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, I could step into a world that wasn't mine. 1 minute, I'm blending into the background, sipping champagne and pretending to know a thing or two about contemporary art. And the next, I'm caught in the gaze of a man who looked like he stepped right out of a billionaire fantasy. Tall, dark, and devastatingly handsome, with eyes that made my knees weak, and a presence that made the entire room feel small. Enter Damian Kane, a name whispered among the city's most powerful, and for good reason. Damian wasn't just wealthy, he controlled an empire. A shadow empire, one where deals were made with a handshake and secrets buried with a bullet. But of course, I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know I was about to step into a world of high stakes, dangerous games, and dark desires. He approached me with a confidence that made my breath hitch. "Clarice," he said, his voice a smooth purr that made my skin tingle. His hand found the small of my back, and I nearly shivered at the contact. "You look like someone who could use a little excitement in her life." I should have corrected him. I should have said, "Actually, my name's Claire, and I don't belong here." But I didn't. Maybe it was the champagne. Maybe it was the dangerous allure of this man who seemed to command the world around him. Or maybe it was the part of me that longed for something more, something thrilling. So instead of running away, I played along. "I'm listening," I replied, my voice more confident than I felt. Damian's lips curved into a smile that made my stomach flip. "Good girl." Those two words, simple yet loaded with power, set the tone for what was to come. What followed was a month of dizzying highs and gut-wrenching lows. Damian Kane swept me into a life I could have only imagined in my wildest dreams and darkest nightmares. By day, I was wrapped in luxury. Designer clothes, private shopping sprees, exclusive dinners at restaurants where the waitstaff knew my name. By night, I found myself entangled in a world that danced dangerously close to the edge of legality. Damian wasn't like any man I'd met before. He didn't just want arm candy or someone to show off at events. He wanted control, complete control, over me, over every aspect of my life. It started small, with little things, choosing what I wore, dictating my schedule. At first, I told myself it was harmless. I was in his world, after all, and this was just part of the game. But Damian's games went deeper than I ever expected. He wasn't just powerful. He was the kind of man who could make or break lives with a single word. And I was about to learn just how dangerous that could be. His business dealings weren't the kind you read about in Forbes. They were the kind that involved locked briefcases exchanged in dimly lit rooms, whispered threats, and deals made with a nod instead of a contract. I tried to ignore it, tried to play my part, but every time I thought I was safe, he'd do something to remind me of just how deep I'd gotten. "Clarice," he'd murmur, his voice a velvet caress in the dark of night, his hand tracing a possessive path down my spine. You know, if anyone ever crossed me, I'd have no problem making them disappear. New York's a big city. People go missing all the time. A shiver would run down my spine, but I never dared question him. Instead, I'd curl into his chest, his scent of expensive cologne and danger wrapping around me like a blanket. I was in too deep, and Damian knew it. He played with me like a cat plays with a mouse, gentle at first, but always with the threat of something darker underneath. Despite the danger, there was something intoxicating about being with Damian. The way he could make the world around us bend to his will, the way he'd look at me like I was the most prized possession in his collection. And then there were those moments, those rare, quiet moments when we were alone, and he'd let his guard down, if only for a second. In those moments, I saw glimpses of the man beneath the power. The man who whispered confessions in my ear as he gripped me tight, as though he was afraid I'd slip away. I was addicted to the thrill of it all until one night, everything changed. We were at one of Damien's infamous poker games, held in the penthouse of a hotel so exclusive that I didn't even know it existed until Damien brought me there. The room was filled with powerful men. Men who controlled the city from behind the scenes. Men who looked at me like I was nothing more than a shiny object Damien had brought to entertain them. But Damien was losing. Badly. His usual cool facade was starting to crack. I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers tapped impatiently against the table. He was frustrated, and when Damien got frustrated, things tended to spiral. And then he looked at me. His eyes darkened with something I didn't recognize, and suddenly I felt like prey caught in the gaze of a predator. How about we raise the stakes? Damien's voice was low, dangerous. He wasn't asking for my permission. He was making a statement. Clarice versus his wife? Winner takes all. The men around the table chuckled, but I didn't. I froze. Damien wasn't talking about money anymore. He was talking about me. About my body, my presence, my very existence being wagered in a twisted game of power. For a moment, I considered running. But then something snapped inside me. I had spent weeks playing the role of Damien's toy, of the girl who followed orders and kept her mouth shut. But I wasn't just Clary, and I wasn't about to let Damien or anyone else turn me into a pawn. I stood up, my heart hammering in my chest, but my voice steady. "Gentlemen," I said, my eyes locking onto Damien's. "Before we raise the stakes, how about I raise some truths?" I shot him a look that told him I was done playing games. "Did you know Damien has been skimming from your accounts? Or that your wife over there," I pointed to a man whose face had gone pale, "has been fucking her Pilates instructor for months?" I turned to Damien, smiling sweetly. "And Damien? He's got more offshore accounts than you can count. You might want to look into those." The room erupted into chaos. Voices shouted, fists slammed onto the table, and accusations flew like bullets. In the confusion, I slipped away, my pulse racing as I darted down the hallway, past the guards, and into the elevator. I didn't stop running until I was out in the street, the cool night air hitting my face like a slap of reality. My heels clicked against the pavement as I ran, the designer shoes I'd once felt so glamorous in now, nothing more than a reminder of how deep I'd let myself fall. When I finally reached my tiny apartment, I collapsed onto the floor, surrounded by the remnants of my double life, luxury dresses, jewelry, and designer handbags scattered like evidence of my deception. I had escaped Damien, but at what cost? The person I used to be, the woman who would have never dared to dance so close to the edge of danger, was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who had tasted power, danger, and desire, and who wasn't entirely sure she wanted to go back to the way things were before. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. A text from an unknown number flashed across the screen. "Impressive performance, Clarice. Same time, next week." My finger hovered over the block button, but I didn't press it. Part of me knew this was my chance to walk away, to disappear and leave Damien and his world behind. But the other part of me, the part that craved the danger, the thrill, couldn't let go. I found myself typing back, "Only if you can keep up, darling. Opera popper." As I hit send, I realized that the real deception wasn't the lie I'd told Damien or his associates. It was the lie I'd been telling myself. I wasn't just Claire anymore. I was Clarice too. And Clarice, she was just getting started. The sugar baby game was over. The real game, the one with power, control, and secrets, had just begun. And this time I wasn't going to play by Damien's rules. I was going to make my own. Strap in, New York.